Hey, what is going on, guys? I'm Mario and welcome back to another Cinema 4D tutorial. So I had a question about non-sub-D, actually non-subdivision surface way of modeling, meaning that we're not using subdivision surface. We are not so much focused on having quads in the scene, so triangles, angons, all that works. What we're going to use here is Booleans, so found right here. We're going to use Bevels, and also what I'm going to show you is Bevel modifier. And more or less that's it. Also, one other note that I would like to mention is that when it comes to this way of, let's say, modeling, I would prefer to use Moi3D simply because it gives you more freedom and you don't have to think about things that you will need to think here. And I'm going to show you later what I mean when I say that. So that out of the way, I just want to again show this what I have here, actually wrong way. So what I have here is just a few assets that I created really quick so that we can use with Booleans so that I actually create those connections. And just to get us started, so I want to explain what we're going to do first, just and real quick. So let's create editable cubes. So what I'm going to do is just collapse this cube so that I can, let's say, push this outwards a bit like that. And then I would like to do is select all of the edges, let's say these edges. And like I mentioned, we're going to use bevel. So I can do a bevel like that. And this will be just fine. What we can do is we can apply bevel modifier, so found here, and I can put it as a child of the cube. And if you notice, and if I come here and if I increase the offset and even increase the level subdivision, we will get more or less the same result. What we can do with this bevel is also where it says selection, we can actually point to selection of edges that this offset and this subdivision is applied to, meaning that if I turn this off, if I go to my cube and if I go to my edge mode and these edges that I previously selected, and if I go to V, select, and then if I set selection for those edges, it will appear in this icon right here. And what I can select the name, and let's say I can call it Big Bevel, let's say, and just hit enter. And now this selection will gonna contain the name Big Bevel. So when I come here, I can now apply this selection to the selection area. And when I turn it on, then you will see that it's only affecting this edges that we specified with this selection. So you can also add, let's say, another bevel here. And what it will do, it will actually try to do bevel on top of your bevel. So there's not a super way that you can actually stack those. So if I even try here and try to create an offset, you will see what will happen. So basically we will need to do a new selections for new beveling, meaning we're going to need to do the same thing for the new edges. So that's something to keep in mind. So let's now go ahead and try to create something out of this with Booleans. So what are Booleans? And I will just go here and add a bool, and I will add this cube as a child of this bool. And what I can do now is select any of these objects that I have here. So let's say this one, and actually maybe let's select this one. So I can just put it here. Let's say like this. Actually, let's select something more simple like polygon. I just want to scale it. And let's say I'm gonna put it here. And now I'm gonna put it inside of the bool under the cube. And when I click on the Boolean, I have a few operations here. So it says A subtract B. I have high quality, create single object, hide new edges, and create found breaks at intersections. Most of the time you want to have most of them on. Now what each of them does, and if I go to display, chord shading with lines, you will see that we have a bunch of new edges connecting to this newly created shape. So we have Boolean, currently says Boolean type A subtracting B, so meaning A is subtracting this object right here. So we also have a union B, so now we have both objects connected. Then we have intersection, which will just give us the intersection of these two objects. And then we have A without B, which will just create an empty hole. So in this case, and most of the times what we want to use is A subtract B, or sometimes even A union B. So more or less that is all. Now as for create single object, that's more or less self-explanatory. And now as for the hide new edges, we're going to get a bit more cleaner geometry here. Now, when it comes to hide new edges, I'm going to leave this for now. What we're going to do here, we actually want to stack probably a bunch of stuff here, create interesting intersections, create interesting shapes. And what we also want to do is create nice bevels. So instead of going here manually, what we can do is select this bool, and Alt-G hotkey will create a null object from the object selected. So now we have a new null. And inside of this new null, just right above a Boolean, what I will do is add a bevel. So like that. And as you may notice, it's getting a bit crazy here. So what I need to do is two possibilities, and probably you want to do both of them. So first one being just hide new edges. Second one being going into bevel. So even with hide new edges, what we have here is the same thing that I mentioned at the very beginning, is that when you have a bevel applied, it will actually apply on every edge, because you do have edges selected. Now you can use angle, and that will sort of fix that problem. Or like I mentioned before, you can use selections, but for selection means that you would need to have this Boolean collapsed, meaning that it's no longer Boolean, but you need to go and make it editable and make a single object out of that to use that edge function. So this use angle is sort of a shortcut to that, and just to preview how everything's gonna look like. Now, final thing I would like to mention, this bevel I would use for last. So meaning that let's focus on actually beveling, actually doing all the Booleans first. And then once we're done, we can apply the bevels to whatever we want to. So this is just something to keep in mind. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull this polygon out to, okay, I can actually delete it and recreate it here if I need it. So what I'm going to do first is try to play with the shape and use some of this here. And how I created these selections here. So maybe I can show that also real quick. So let's say this one, I will just use a split here and push this outward. So basically what I did is I started with a polygon like that. And then what you can do is extrude, and like, let's say like that, and push it out. And basically what I did the same thing down. And then you can just select these edges, and then you can bevel them. And basically this is how I created the shape. And then finally select all. And then what you can do is right click to extrude, and make sure create caps are on, and do slight extrusion like that. So that's how I created that shape. And now let's see how we can use these shapes and create something out of this cube right here. So I have this cube, and so bevel I'm gonna turn off, and I'm gonna keep it turned off for the most of the time. And one other thing I would like to mention, if you have it turned on, and if you now start to pull these objects inside of this Boolean right here, what is going to happen is that Cinema will decide I don't want to work anymore, so goodbye for now. And meaning that everything is going to crash. So I would just be careful with that. So just turn the bevel for now off. And also what we can do here, so I'm just going to call this asset so that's more organized. And I'm going to do it like that. And let's call this group. And also what we can do is, since I'm going to stack a bunch of stuff here, I can delete this. So since we are going to reuse all of these assets on this cube, what I would like to have, also let's put this group down. What I would like to have is, instead of, let's say now I want to put this object here, let's say, and I want to use it under the Boolean. So let's say here. So instead of creating a new Boolean every time, what we can do is simply again group this cube. So Alt G for group, and it will create a new null. And this I can call subtraction. Subtraction. So yeah, like that. And everything that I want to have subtracted, I will just simply put it into this group. But for now, I'll just put it out and disable Boolean. Okay, first, let me do a few adjustments in a cube here, and maybe we can put it like that. And also what I can do is select the string selection and bevel this. So let's say something like that. And now I'm going to show you what I mean that in Cinema 4D will have few restrictions when it comes to Boolean and getting certain shapes. So, okay, now I would like to have this right here. So I'm just creating a nice intersection. And also what I can do is add it into a symmetry, and so that I have it on both sides. Okay, so now we are coming to a point where I would like to mention those issues from the beginning. So notice that we have these edges going here. So even if I go to Boolean, so more or less everything will be fine. Okay, just maybe here, let's first do this. So more or less looks everything in order. But let's say if I come to my cube and if I decided to push it a bit more aside and then turn the Boolean on, now this is when we start to get certain issues, when we have multiple edges connecting and intersecting. So we have edges here, right here, and we have edges here. So no matter what, at least as I'm aware of, whatever we do in these settings here, I'm not sure that nothing of that will do any good. Even though if we go and add multiple edges here, that won't help a lot at all. So the only thing that I found being helpful is just to move it away so that we don't have these edges intersecting with these edges. So when I say these edges, I mean this edge is here with this edges here. So yeah, like I mentioned, there are certain limitations in this area. So if I'm wrong, please correct me on that. So, but as for my experience, yeah, there were some problems. So just to continue, let's go ahead and add more things here. So I'm going to use this cylinder. And again, I'm going to turn the Boolean on and just going to save real quick. And just, yeah, save as often as you can when you're using something like this. And again, let's put this in the subtractions as well. Turn the Boolean, so this is how it looks. And what I can do here is push this cylinder inside, let's say. Okay, more or less that looks just fine. So what I would like to do is move on and talk about a few other issues that you might encounter. And the next one being, so let's talk about connect objects. So I do have here a few cylinders connected into connect object. And if you put it into, let's say, subtractions, so I'm gonna turn the Boolean off for now and reposition. So let's say something like that. It should also work just fine. What the problem might be if you turn the bevel on, just before you turn the bevel on, make sure that you save the file, because it can happen that it crashes. And just to avoid any side of crashing, make sure that you go to connect and make this editable object. Same thing goes for symmetry. Sometimes it might work just fine, but sometimes it can decide to not. So let's take a look into one other example. So let's say here I do have, let me see, okay, this can go outside. So I have these cubes that I connected here. Now these cubes, what I did is just flatten them, so use scale. And instead of connect object, I just connected them into one object immediately. So in theory, that should work. So this time worked fine. Let's say when I was doing some testing, when I did the same operation, the whole object really went crazy. So there were polygons everywhere. So up until now, I couldn't find the reason why it does that. And what's the reason except that the Boolean is still a bit buggy. So just make sure that you save often to avoid any unfortunate accidents, I would say. Now, the problem that I'm pretty sure that it's not working is if you go ahead and let's say if you have a cylinder. So I'm gonna rotate this and let's say that we have something like 6 subdivisions, and I'm gonna scale it down and make it editable. I think actually I don't need to do that. And if I go ahead and use a cloner, so if I use a cylinder within a cloner and I go into honeycomb array and turn this down to something like 20. Let's move this here and something like that. And just play with the settings a bit. So now if I try to use cloner here in the Boolean, just don't. Go ahead and make it editable and go and select children and connect objects plus delete. So now even if I select this cloner, so everything and optimized, I'm going to scale it down. And if I try to use it, let's say here, and let's put it in subtractions, turn the Boolean on, you will see that it's actually not going to work for some reason when you use cloner objects. So many times I tried with the new files, but whenever I would use a cloner, it would never work. So sometimes only when you would use a connect object and you would place it here, and let's duplicate it. And also what I can do is maybe delete one of them. So let's say something like that. What I can select both of them and group, put in subtractions, and then in this case it would work. So I just want to go ahead and quickly then move the remaining parts that I have here. So let's deselect Boolean, and I'm going to push this down. let's say something like here. Now, again, we come to the same problem. If I come and put it into subtractions, and if I would like to select, let's say, these edges. Now, these edges are connecting with, if you remember, these edges right here. And if I decide to use Boolean, and actually if I decide to use Bevel and turn the Boolean on, it will show the same problem that we had before. So meaning that either I need to forget about that and use only these two. Then when I use Boolean, then it should be more or less fine. So, but still there will be some small deformations on the surface. And finally, maybe what I want to do is, let's say, put this here. And what I can do is connect these 3 polygons into one object. And let's say position here, and again put into subtractions like that. And what I can do also maybe is turn the Boolean first, use this one here at the side, like that. And let's use symmetry on this, and what I'm going to do is just make it editable just in case, and put in subtractions. Here I'm going to do make editable again just in case, and turn the Boolean on, and I'm going to delete these. So yeah, more or less this would be it for now. And as you can notice, there are certain limitations, but if you know how to avoid those limitations, I still think you can get pretty decent results. And now to, as like I mentioned at the very end, what I'd like to do is actual bevels. So what we can do is either turn this one on, which it's not working as intended. So maybe if we turn the radius down. So this is the point where you can turn the beveling on just to see how it looks when you have a bit more smoother edges. And again, maybe a bit more subdivision to it. Something like that. Or what you can do is also collapse this Boolean, meaning that you can go and make it editable. And just delete this. And then you can come to these certain edges and do the beveling manually. So again, let's say we can select, okay, these two just for now, and then I can do a bevel here like that. So now finally also what you can do is the same thing that I mentioned at the very beginning. What you can is select the certain edges that you would like to have certain, let's say, bevel radius, and that it's not destructive, meaning that you can edit it anytime if you change your mind. Because if you, let's say, go here and use normal bevel and let's say do operation like that, you cannot go back anymore. So if you change your mind on how this looks, and also if you have this let's say func problem, what you can do is simply select all and then unbreak func shading. That should deal with it. But if you don't want to go that destructive, so this is where it comes useful to have the bevel modifier. So what you would do again is go to V, select, and then set selection, and then call it, let's say, edge side, hit enter, go to bevel, and then simply put it into selection. And then I can, like it was, let's say 0.5, I can increase it to, let's say, something like 2, or any point that I wish. So yeah, more or less this would be it, I would say. The only thing maybe I'd like to mention is, even though that I said that we cannot stack this bevels. I believe that in this case, we can actually get away with that because if I now go to, let's say, angle limits and decrease the offset to something like 0.5, I think that it will be just fine. But again, in case of something where you want to do a bit more precise work, you probably want to do it manually anyway, where you just select the edges. But I just want to mention in this case that anyway. So in any case, I would like to close this video here. So if you do think that I did miss something, or if you just want to ask anything, just feel free to leave your comment in the comments section down below. Other than that, yeah, I would like to say thank you for watching one more time and see you next time.